So getting to our conversation, and yeah, so last week the president made some presidential action. It was, all this written, a decree, therefore, in witness thereof, to this legal document, at a demonstration, presidential proclamation on the framework for compensation of victims of demonstrations and public protests. It begins those ones legalese. Whereas the Constitution does this. Whereas, since the Constitution does this, whereas, we shall read it in detail. Now, therefore, I, William Samoei Ruto, President and Commander-in-Chief of the Kenya Defence Forces, in exercise of the authority vested in me by the Constitution, do hereby, 1, establish a coordinating framework for compensation of victims of protests and riots, which shall be vested under the Executive Office of the President. The Executive Office of the President shall discharge this mandate in collaboration with the Office of the Attorney General, the Ministry of Interior and National Administration, the National Treasury, and all other relevant state agencies. And therefore, I designate Professor Makau Mutua, Senior Advisor, Constitutional Affairs and Human Rights, as the principal coordinator of the State Intervention and Compensation Framework, and the tenure of this special coordination framework shall be 120 days from the date hereof. It has the seal, it has the signature, William Samoei Ruto, President, signed on this 6th day of August in the year of our Lord, 2025. Hear ye. Well, read some of these things and you're like, way.
The legalese is just to make sure that you can't... this
is not a roadside declaration.
Nope, it's not.
No, this is proclamation, and it is based and anchored in the law. Not just the law, but the supreme law, the Constitution. Ian Mutiso is an advocate of the High Court, and he joins us now to discuss this. Ian, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you back here.
Man, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, the second time is always a charm, right?
Yes. Yes. Asante sana for joining us. As we get into the conversation, first, Jano is going to give you the day's quote.
Yes.
You know the drill.
Yeah. You know the drill.
Yeah, I do.
Angela Merkel was the former Chancellor of Germany. And one of the world's most influential heads of state for over a decade, but also the country's first female leader. That was in Germany. And she once said, always be more than you appear and never appear to be more than you are.
Oh, wow.
I'll say it again. Always be more than you appear and never appear to be more than you are.
Oh, that sounds quite profound. I usually I think I can compare that to another quote one of my very good mentors gave me. Is like, anytime when you're in your room, act like a sponge. Just soak in all the knowledge, information. Don't be the loud piece in the room. Don't act smart. But the moment you get an opportunity to actually speak, be profound, be concise, and make it so impactful that it actually moves the room. So I like to think of it like that. And, what else can I say?
No, I think you literally broke it down the way I understood it, the way we were having the conversation with Eric earlier on, which is when you're in a room, even when you know your value, even when you know what you bring to the table, it doesn't mean you lead with that.
Yeah.
You can lead by being the person who listens, but yes, you still step up and come as you fully are when you get a chance to speak. So fully agree. It's balance.
So who takes the lead in this meeting? Because all of you are coming here and all of you are just, sitting there. You're being meek in the name of being modest.
That's why there's always a conversation.
So the convener is talking to themselves, but because you don't want to be the first one to speak, so everybody does not bring... Come on, this is a boring meeting.
No.
Come out there, Ian, and say, you know what, I'm a lawyer.
Even with the pen, listen, I'm a lawyer.
And the law is very clear on these particular matters. Just go out there and say it.
I think also,
don't oversell yourself.
That's true.
But sell yourself.
That's true. I think also when you go for board meetings, I tend to sit on a few NGO meetings. And what I like from one of our chairpersons is that when we start meetings and we have an agenda, she always likes to start with each person saying a thing so that everybody has a same playing field. And once she speaks after she already gotten all the views of every single member, I think that's usually a very good way of starting every other meeting because everybody will have spoken. You just don't have a sitting duck.
That's a good approach. Yeah. That's an approach I could stand behind for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Ian, let me read this proclamation, the whereas. There are 3 whereases, because that's a meat of the entire proclamation. It says, whereas the Constitution establishes the dual obligations of the state and its citizens to uphold the delicate balance between civic responsibility and the exercise of constitutionally guaranteed freedoms as enshrined in the Bill of Rights. So here it said it's dual. State has its responsibility and the citizens do have their responsibility. Okay. Whereas the promulgation of the Constitution in 2010, the expanded democratic space has afforded Kenyans from all walks of life the liberty to express themselves through demonstrations and picketing, some of which regrettably have turned violent, resulting in bodily harm and loss of life. Okay. So it's acknowledging that because of this constitution of yours, there's been mandamano. And the mandamano has regrettably led to violence resulting in bodily harm and loss of life. And then now, whereas there is compelling national interest in establishing a framework for accountability, redress, and reparations for victims of demonstrations and public protests, including civilians and security personnel who lost their lives or suffered bodily harm during public protests and riots since the year 2017. Now I therefore do the following. Now, that's why he establishes this thing, and he says Makao Mutua will share it, and they'll have 120 days. Those 3 things. Yeah. Is that solid ground?
I think the fact that he has quoted the Constitution, I think he's learning. Because he's learning to, rather he's recognizing that indeed the government indeed needs to follow due process and the Constitution. And I'm just, at this particular point, I'm just glad that he knows that those particular articles in the Constitution does exist. What I have a problem are the other whereas. Yeah. I think...
the second whereas says that the Bill of Rights gives all citizens the right to picket and to express themselves, and citizens have taken that Bill of Rights and put it in their pocket like this. They walk around with it.
Yeah.
Picket, here I am. And then the third one, that people have actually gotten injured and some have died, including security personnel.
I think when we look at all the statements the president has been saying, don't you think it's a bit contradictory from what he said earlier? He said you can easily get to shoot somebody on the leg. On the other time, the Cabinet Secretary for Interior proposes that killing is okay. And then now we are seeing such a turnaround. But I also think that this statement is just being made at the cusp of international pressure. We have seen how the United States is coming in and they're starting to rather make calls for international human rights organizations to look into what is happening into Kenya. There was a time 50,000 Kenyans did a whole petition to the ICC. So I think he's just starting to realize, my friend, I don't want to go back there. And he's just trying to clean up an image. But I think also at the same time, I think he's getting to realize the kind of impact that he had with those particular statements. And I think one of the first things that even should have come before this statement is actually an apology from the state. I think an apology from the Cabinet Secretary of Interior should have come, an apology from various members of parliament. So I don't have an issue as far as them recognizing that people were hurt. That's a good start. But I think a lot needs to happen even before we can start considering what these solutions is recommending.
Yeah, one of the victims' family members actually said that during a news bite. She said, you know, it wouldn't hurt for them to say sorry.
Yeah.
We're not discounting the fact that this could be an approach that allows us to be compensated for the loss, but it wouldn't hurt to hear them have some kind of apology for the lives lost. It was a very powerful bite. A couple of questions to ask, and I'll come to that later, just in terms of how a compensation framework needs to be implemented. But what's your greatest concern in terms of how this is going to roll out? What needs to happen? That it's been said, it's been made, this is going to happen. But what needs to happen next, and what's your greatest concern about how that could go wrong?
You know, legally, as far as this particular statement is concerned, the president has the mandate to create some form of an ad hoc committee. Well and good. But as far as the law is required, we already have constitutional offices that are mandated in terms of how to step in and look into compensation matters. We have the Victim Protection Board, which has representation from almost every single government agency that is responsible in matters compensation, justice, and reforms. So for me, how I look at this, I think the president might not be aware that this particular offices does exist. As a matter of fact, there is this thing, when I used to be a former government employee, they used to call it a tripartite. This is basically interagency committees that will come together and they will make some form of committee that looks into these particular things. And that already exists. So he's trying to basically create another Victim Protection Board. He's trying to create another Human Rights Independent Commission. And it's sad to see that a whole professor of law is not able to have advised the president and say, hey, listen, there's already mechanisms, there's already a framework. And mind you, we also have Article 159. The executive cannot be leading this particular process. What are you thinking? So I have a lot of problems with it.
Yeah, let's go back. So those that have what has already existed, why haven't they been able to pursue compensation for victims? What have been some of the gaps there?
Well, ideally, let's just take a look from previous experiences. We have the Truth, Justice, Reconciliation Commission, which was literally formed under Act of Law. And what literally happened is that there was very poor implementation from what they actually managed to come up with. The fact of the matter, the birth of things like the NCC probably was one of the few institutions that came good of it. But in the upshot, I think in Kenya we just have poor coordination of implementing true offices. This constitution that we do have is probably one of the strongest we have in Africa, the sub-Saharan Africa, that is a fact. So it's just, we have a poor government that doesn't give the mandate and the power to the existing frameworks. So, and they actually also start to blame the parliament, because for them it's all about their own interests.
Bureaucracy, Parliament Road, Eric's favorite place in Nairobi.
It's just a sad affair.
It's a very sad affair. Earlier, Eric had highlighted when we were starting this show, just trying to speak to, okay, what does compensation really mean? Remember, you were breaking it down. Does it mean to the families of those who are deceased? Does it mean payment? You broke down different levels of compensation that you were questioning.
I was just trying to wonder who's getting compensated here, right? So this particular proclamation mentions security officers and citizens who got injured and those who lost their lives. So are we compensating people who got injured in the course of a demonstration? Are we compensating those that were injured by police? Are we compensating the police that were injured by citizens, or police that got injured, for example, the one who got injured while firing a tear gas canister? Who gets into this bracket of compensation? Who's a victim here?
And you see, that's the whole problem. Okay, according to the Victim Protection Act, victims per se are people who have actually suffered injustices in the arms of the government or state actions. So we know that is something which is already anchored as far as the definition of who is a victim, right? But now when we look at in the wider scope of people who got injured during protests and all this picketing that was happening. Now, I do have a friend who got injured when he had gone to peacefully protest. He got hit by a tear gas canister. I am representing a minor from Limuru who's around 15 years who got shot by the police on the leg. I have somebody who experienced somebody who got shot and died on the street. So in essence, those guys are also victims for they have experienced death. They wouldn't have experienced death at this particular young age. So that's the whole, that's a whole bigger problem. So is there a framework of trying to understand who will be compensated, who will be the victims in these particular mechanisms? But the good thing is that there is already existing institutions who can be able to sit down. They already have, I wouldn't say enough finance or capital to go through the whole country. Probably they need more funding. But they have funds which are allocated to them through the consolidated fund. So Why can't they be given that mandate? Well, what will Makau Mutua do? Will they go around all the country and start instructing the AG? The AG is very senior to Makau Mutua. So it's just very vague in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because Professor Makau Mutua here is a principal coordinator and is supposed to work in collaboration with the Office of the AG, the Ministry of Interior, and the National Treasury. So those three, okay, and any other relevant state agencies that come in, right? You're wondering then how maybe his job here is just to point out to, all right, so here's a framework. How do you draft this framework? The AG's office comes in, tie in the legal loose ends from the Ministry of Interior. So give us the numbers of those people who have reportedly been, victims from all the records that you have as police, from the National Treasury.
Well, let's just take a look and take a step back. We know very well Article 159 states that there should be a whole separation of powers. All right, you have the AG, who sits on top security meetings and actually also gets to attend meetings with the president as far as the other cabinet secretaries are concerned. Now, you have somebody who has been appointed by the president to come and say that this person is in charge of coordinating. As far as that person is concerned and being involved in this particular process, do you think that the voice of the Attorney General and the other members is actually going to be considered? It will feel like the president's the one who's controlling how this thing is going to be done. Who decides on how these families and victims, how they're going to be compensated? Is it that particular coordinating, or rather Makau Mutua, or whatever role he has? My point is, there's already constitutional offices. When you look at the Victim Protection Board, we have representation from the Office of the ODPP. You have IMLU representation from there. You have the Solicitor General being the chairperson of that particular board. So when across the whole board, I'll ask you to go and take a look at the membership. Those are highly qualified people, and they're highly informed as far as the law is concerned. And ideally, I do believe that the role Makau Mutua is starting to play, it's actually already existing. And I'm telling you, Makau Mutua did not get to advise the president. There's already mechanisms of this thing. What the president should have said is that there's already an existing institution framework. These are the people who are supposed to go ahead and be able to give that particular direction, because that's a whole coordination committee. They're pulling state resources from different agencies. And indeed, Makau Mutua is basically, in one sense, he's acting like the Victim Protection Board, him himself.
But like Janet was asking, they haven't been doing the job. Those other people who you're saying have been given the mandate to do the job, they haven't done it.
But Eric,
2017, if we just use this timeline that have been given by the president, 2017, there were people who were injured and died. 2022, there were people who were injured and died. 2024, 2025, people who were injured and died. These institutions that you're saying have been in place, have they started any work? As far as you know, have they done it?
Well, they haven't gotten to do the job as far as required. In my opinion, I do believe that, one, state resources are actually intentionally rather squeezed for them to be able to do their job. When we're looking at Kenya National Human Rights Commission, basically they're so underfunded. I don't know if you've ever looked at some of the vehicles these guys tend to use. I don't know if it's a matter of just being low-key so that they're not being seen how to travel, but the state of affairs is that these guys are highly underfunded, and yet they have such a huge mandate as far as following up on human rights violations and things like that. The judiciary is highly underfunded. There are no more judges. Like for your whole human rights petition to be heard, and it's under certificate of urgency, it's come under a certificate, but by the time it's actually heard, it will be 1 month plus. So in my view, I think when you have the head of state spending over 2 billion Kenya shillings doing renovations, yet there are these institutional offices that are literally just taking about an extra 300 million or 400 million to do their job. My goodness. Isn't that just a question of ignorance, in my opinion? Yeah.
So the will is there, but the bureaucracy and delays are what really, you know, prevent these institutions from doing what they need to do. I wonder if there's a way, with this new compensation framework, is there no way that the existing committees can push back and say, excuse me, we've been here.
Yeah.
This is our mandate. This is what we had committed to do. This is the amount that we had asked for. This is what we received or didn't receive. And therefore, we find this to be an infringement of the work that's already been done. Or can they argue, no, our mandates are different? Because otherwise, I think duplication of roles is one of the biggest things that happen in this government.
Yes.
Over and over again. Even when we've spoken around gender-based violence and the committees that are formed, and you'll ask the people who come here, but there's already one that's been formed.
There are other people who are already doing this job.
There are other people who are already doing it. There are already people who are funded. What's with the erasure? Is there any way to push back and say, look, we were here, integrate us or give us this mandate?
Yes, of course, they should be able to push back. Like I said, this is the Victim Protection Board is under the office of the Attorney General. The Attorney General should have actually, I don't know if Dorcas was, her opinion was sought before this particular circular was issued. But ideally, I think from the onset, the AG should have said, hey, listen, we actually have an office that is actually existing that can be able to take care of this thing. And something that you've said, which is quite profound, is that the political goodwill to make these offices do what they're supposed to do is something which does not necessarily exist. Look at IPOA. There's such a big backlog from what IPOA is supposed to do. The other day, the Cabinet Secretary of Interior was saying that there's not going to be any form of rather compliance from the police officers when you're being questioned about the actions that you took. Is that political goodwill? So that's the type of murky waters they're working under. And I truly believe that as an advocate of the High Court, and I hopefully say this with the trust of other members who work under LSK, is that I do hope that we can start holding these people accountable for their own actions. And I think all this particular circular, I think, is just trying to tamp down the waters of the legal actions so many advocates are looking to undertake. So
just getting ahead of them.
Yeah, just getting ahead of them. Perhaps even the victim family, some of them have already been reached out. So you just never know.
Maybe dealing with it politically instead of legally. The leader of WIPA and the leader of DAPK, Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka and Eugene Omalo, respectively, had actually released a statement following the formation of this framework. And Professor Makao Mutua took to Twitter to respond to them and said, I've seen a statement by my friends, SK Musyoka and Eugene Omalo, claiming that the government of Kenya cannot establish a compensation mechanism for victims of protests and riots. They couldn't be more wrong. Transitional justice mechanisms are always done by governments. The most famous of these was the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The TRC was set up by the Government of National Unity to help deal with what happened under apartheid. As we know, the apartheid era was marked by the most unspeakable abuses and human rights violations meted out especially on black Africans. I suggest that my two learned brothers, Musyoka and Omalo, find a better argument to oppose our noble efforts to heal the nation, or exercise their conscience and join us in the viable path for responding to the victims, their families and loved ones. Not everything must be subjected to cheap and toxic politics. That's what he said.
Yeah.
He got a couple of responses. We shall be looking at those. But let's first take a break. We are having a conversation on this particular framework established by the president on, compensating victims of the Maandamano since 2017 to present. And we're asking Ian Mutiso, an advocate of the High Court, whether this is a way to go or not. We'd like to hear as well from you. You can share your comments and feedback on all our digital platforms. We'll be back in a moment at 29 after 7.
The Kikombe says we already have independent bodies like IPOA and the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights to investigate and recommend compensation. Isn't setting up more commissions duplication, Jamani, which is kind of what we've spoken to. Gitonga Daniel is speaking about a story we highlighted earlier about this bribing issue. The amount you pay to join the disciplined forces is in the region of 500,000, that being the cheapest. This money goes to top officers. That's why it's thriving. The Kikombe also says you're seeking a job that will pay you 30,000. you seek a loan worth millions. Some things make little sense. Right. So let's continue our conversation with Ian Mutiso, advocate
Paul
of the
Maina
High Court.
actually also had said something, saying sorry too late is not only irrelevant but a measure of arrogance. Killing innocent people and then engaging in compensation is baseless and an insult to our democracy. Right? In line with what we're discussing with Wakili Ian Mutiso, which is on the framework that was established by the president last week to be coordinated by Professor Makau Mutua, his advisor on constitution and human rights. Now, Makau Mutua is a man on human rights, has that record, sterling record, one of the founders of the Kenya Human Rights Commission, and had been pushing for it. So he's advising the president on this issue of rights. But also on the other side, Ian, there's the implementation of the MOU by the president and the former prime minister. Okay, UDA and ODM. Point number 6 of the MOU between Raila and Ruto is the right to peaceful assembly and protest under Article 37 and compensation of all pending claims of abuse and derogation of this right. So that point basically says derogation of the right to peaceful assembly and protest remains one of the shameful realities of the excess of Kenya's law and order responses since independence. The effort to uphold this right must now involve not just the taking of responsibility by officers who break the law, but also by the compensation of the victims of these derogations. An amnesty must be granted to those who are charged for offenses based on the exercise of their right to peaceful assembly. Okay? So this is one. And we know they signed this thing in March. And since then, we actually saw ODM meeting and saying, you know, this MOU thing must be implemented. And then we saw the president again last week coming out with Raila to say, now, we are forming a team to make sure that there's a full implementation of our MOU, which includes this point number 6. I think a day later, we see now him establishing this framework to be coordinated by Makau Mutua. You can see there is a progress in terms of there's an MOU that we signed.
Yes.
And we need to implement it. We need to appear to be doing what we ought to be doing.
No.
If you didn't make noise about that point in the MOU, why are you making noise now?
Well, I can say that as far as political issues are concerned, I have no issue against the president and Raila when they're trying to mend their own particular relationship, and that's their own political solution. My problem is we don't need a political solution. We need a legal solution that actually follows the law. So take, for example, if, let's say this whole thing kicks off and they come up with a few membership, they pull people from civil society or different state organizations, and they do their work within that 120 days that they're estimating to use, and things kick off. Families are compensated, like Alberto Joang's father, they're given 2 million and extra change here and there. They do similar for the other people. Now, how can we justify those particular actions, knowing very well they're not anchored in law? How can we replicate? Janet has just equally said, there are so many victims. You have PV guys who suffered harm. You have people who have suffered land injustices. Yeah. You have people from Shakahola. You have like this, so many things that this country has not even started the healing process of. Yeah. So what justification would we have as far as law to the point whereby the same is actually going to be replicated? Where's this money coming from? Is it coming from the consolidated fund? So when the Auditor General is going to look over the books in the next financial year, what justification will she have to say that, okay, indeed, this money was actually well spent? There's no anchor in law as far as to whatever actions these guys are intending to do.
But guys, I think we're just jumping too far ahead here.
In what sense?
This 120 days, I don't suppose that in 120 days, people should have received their money.
Yeah. No.
I think this is a framework that then looks at establishing that legal journey that you're saying. Yeah. That then this is how we shall anchor this compensation framework in law and the procedures to be followed. And that's why the Attorney General's office is involved. In saying, so this is what we have on record from the Ministry of Interior, the National Police Service. This is what we know. These are the things that happened since 2017 up to present in all political demonstrations. You see, it's not just around 2018 or 2022. There were demonstrations even in between. So they established that framework that says that this is how we shall be knowing that this is how these violations are happening. Yeah. This is how we shall identify the victims of these violations. Even going forward, we shall record them in this particular manner. This is how we shall pursue justice for those officers and individuals who are responsible. And this is how we shall compensate those that are victims that require to be compensated. I think it establishes a framework. It doesn't say that in 120 days, Makau Mutua will now be doing another empowerment. And what do you understand, Janet?
I'm trying to break. First of all, are advocates groups and the public allowed to shape the final version of this framework, or is it cast in stone? Because I think that would be an important precedent. But what I understand, based on what you're saying, Eric, is okay, fair enough. It sets out the precedents, but it also needs to have a very tight time frame as to when this compensation should happen. Others, it drags out. I think there should be pressure that within 120 days, some form of starting point should have happened. Have you met with some of the families? Have you convened them? Not just, okay, it's 120 days later, the framework is ready. Can we shape the final document? Can there also be a push to make sure that certain steps have taken place to establish who is being compensated and why? Otherwise, it just remains another fancy document. Kenya has many of them.
Well, allow me to say this. Eric, I have no problem as far as this framework concept is concerned. As far as I know, the president's actions are not illegal as far as this publication is concerned. But what I'm trying to point at is it's a duplication.
Yeah.
There's already an existing office that should be able to do this work. The point is there is also an issue on separation of powers. The thing is, when this particular question and solution is being addressed by the president, my concern is that what makes it so certain that whatever decision that has been coming out from this particular ad hoc committee is going to not only communicate as far as the Constitution is concerned, but it's not going to be their own intentions. So there's already an existing framework. What I'm saying is that it's not him who is supposed to be doing this particular job. There's already constitutional officers who have the mandate from the Office of the Attorney General to come up with special frameworks on how this thing is going to be done. Is it that I don't have an issue on them taking this particular course of action? As a matter of fact, what I would have appreciated is for the president to say that from today, I am actually going to issue a presidential directive to the Attorney General's office to make this a priority. Okay, and they have a specific timeline for them to be able to give on how this particular framework is going to be done.
Yes.
No Makau Mutua.
Okay, wait. Are we allowed to shape the final version of this document, or is it?
Who knows?
Who knows? We don't know.
Oh, we don't know.
I haven't been consulted on this, so I won't speak for them.
It's up in the air.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions that have come to my mind. I'm trying to see which one to start with. First, we'll move to how compensation frameworks should work. I know that Eric spoke to one of the tweets that mentioned the fight for justice for the victims and survivors of apartheid. There's others here I'm seeing of Germany and all the child read. But I wonder how this then opens up that box to what you just mentioned, post-election violence victims, August 7th, 1998 victims and survivors. Because in a sense, and I think we said this during the break, from one of the comments, is this an admission of guilt, first of all? Is this an admission of the government saying people were killed, people died during these protests, unarmed citizens? Is it an admission of guilt? Okay, let me thread my questions, Wakili, because let me thread them. Is it an admission of guilt, number one? Number two, if it is, beyond compensation, what else do we need to be looking at or asking? Because if it's an admission of guilt, then it opens up a much bigger conversation, right? Maybe let's start with those two. Is it an admission of guilt? What more needs to be said or done beyond compensation? If indeed it's an admission of guilt, then we'll speak to compensation frameworks.
Well, I think from the legal standpoint, I wouldn't go into a mediation or a consent or signing some form of legal document to compensate another party if there was no particular wrong that my client particularly did. So for me to see this, I think the president has realized that there was some great fault on their part as far as the instructions they gave, the advice they gave from the CS and all those type of people. The only thing that I'm very certain of, compensation does not necessarily mean justice. Because take a look, there's so many people who were able to suffer grievous harm from police actions. Some people have died, some people are still in wards receiving treatment, and we need to hold those particular police officers accountable. I participated in the Rex Masai matter, the inquest, and one of the key things is that does not mean that advocates who are representing victims are not going to pursue justice in court. It's a good conversation starter that they're going to be compensated, but before that particular compensation happens, let's just make sure that it's under a certain framework so that we can be able to do sort of, not necessarily a copy and paste, but we can have sort of like a roadmap on how this thing should be done. And if the AG's office is the one who's going to take the lead on this particular thing and not Makau Mutua, then that is a welcome point for me. As for now, I think this statement just confirms to me that indeed it is an admission as far as the city is concerned. And when we look forward, I just hope that we can be able to anchor this as far as the law is concerned and we move on from there.
Yeah.
You know, there were many responses to what Makau Mutua, tweeted here and what he said. And among them came from Professor Kivuda Kibwana, who said, Prof, the South African TJ, Truth and Reconciliation Commission, was established via the Promotion of National Unity and Reconciliation Act of 1995. What is Kenya's law for the compensation mechanism for victims of protests and riots? And he puts it in quotes, quoting the presidential proclamation. What is Kenya's mechanism for establishing this thing that you're doing? Right? Because the other one started with law and then mechanism.
Yep.
And this one, it does not come against law and mechanism. And Makau Mutua responds to him and says, Prof, you know very well that empty legal formalism has historically been the death knell of substantive justice. Why? Don't hide behind the form to fight a noble idea simply because you're beefing with the government. It's perfectly fine for the executive to take certain actions through proclamations or executive orders. It's done in every democracy, including the US, from whence Kenya borrowed the 2010 constitution. He says, look, don't fight this thing. I mean, it's in order for the executive to do this. And like you said, Ian, it's in order for the president to form this. Just that doesn't mean that now we start making noise over this, legalese, where is the law? Surely, people are never going to be compensated.
People have not been compensated.
Yeah, and we'll continue doing this because we keep fighting over those small issues of the law and such other inconveniences.
He was about to answer.
I think that's a very dangerous statement because he knows very well that should we actually be an act of parliament for compensating this particular cause. And this is where the whole problem of disobeying court orders started, just by this small talk. And right now we have such a dire problem of public officers not adhering to court orders. My thing is, I don't think it's right to say that because we do not have an existing framework that this idea should just kick off. It's very careless in my opinion. Reason being, I kid you not, the Auditor General one day is going to start asking questions. Where is this money coming from? Such type of compensation should actually be originating from the consolidated fund. There's independent commissions who have the mandate and they can be able to receive these funds and be able to do something about it. So the fact that I'm telling you this thing is just being done because of 2027, it's just...
There's the political side too. I mean, we agree. There's an MOU that needs to be implemented, to be seen to be implemented. I want to quote another one. These are senior counsel battling.
Going back and forth with each other.
Menasir Abdullahi comes in and says, I agree with the response that Makau Mutua is giving. We are addressing a number of constitutional torts What's a tort, Bwana, in these lawyers?
Basically, it's a wrong that you suffer from another person's actions.
Okay.
Yeah.
These issues can be adequately addressed through referencing particular provisions in the Bill of Rights. We don't need a statutory framework to address issues that are adequately covered by the Constitution.
The tone deaf of some of these legal advices is just concerning. I think from just where I sit, I'm not asking for much. I'm just saying that there is an office which is supposed to be doing this. We cannot have a political answer to such a situation.
Yeah.
It cannot work. Give political solutions to relationship issues in politics, not to this.
Yeah, not where people's lives are affected.
Yeah.
From all the frameworks that exist, whether it's one you've talked about, TJRC, is there anything that you would amend in any of them to hold truth to what victims and families and survivors deserve? Or do you feel like what exists is enough?
I think we do need an amendment for various acts, including the Victim Protection Act. And something that Kivuzo Kibona has said, there was the actions for compensation that happened in Tanzania actually were derived from an act of parliament. So when we look at our current laws, and if you really want this to move quicker, there's already a Victim Protection Act that can actually be amended to actually include victims of protests. So I think that is a quicker way. And of course, because perhaps this is the only opportunity we can say, perhaps if the president is so committed to this, he'll have captured parliament and they'll be able to pass that particular situation. Let it work for us for once. So I think that is one of the better avenues. But
what does it list so far? It's excluded victims of the protests.
Yeah.
Does it capture all other victims, or is it just what is it? What is it? For those who are not knowledgeable on it, what does it capture?
It's just that the definition of a victim needs to be broadened to include this particular issue, and more also to the point that Kenya has always suffered his historical injustices. You have persons who experience the bomb blast. You have BV. Quite a number of things.
Massacre.
Yeah, so I think there needs to be an additional, rather than an expanding of verbiage as far as who a victim is concerned. And indeed, now when it comes to the next, possibly the next financial year, the same way they look at road levies and everything, that should be now part of the conversation. Yeah.
According to various sources, whether it's the Times, International Center for Transitional Justice, OHCHR, based on this, I just want to talk about some other frameworks and compensation that have worked out. So we have Germany, Foundation, Remembrance, Responsibility and Future. The framework was a public-private initiative formed in the year 2000 to compensate forced laborers and others subjected to Nazi injustices. Mechanics, 5.2 billion euros in funding, half from German industry, half from the government, distributed to over 1.6 million victims across nearly 100 countries. Compensation scaled by detention conditions and labor type. So the strengths were that it was large-scale, financial redress, cross-border, differentiated per victim experience. Bilateral compensation for Nazi victims framework, West Germany between 1959 and 1964, negotiated compensation agreements in 12 Western European countries to voluntarily compensate Nazi prosecution victims, paid 876 million under non-admission of liability. Okay, you would know those terminologies better. There was also UK-Kenya settlement, Mau Mau torture victims, the framework in 2013, the UK government, and you can push back or agree or disagree, settled historical legal claims for colonial era abuses. Total payout of £19.9 million to 5,228 Kenyan survivors, approximately £2,600 each. Legal costs covered, funding for a Nairobi memorial. So there's many more listed. And like I said, I gave the sources and the platforms where you can find compensation frameworks.
But all of those are preceded by some law.
Yeah.
So there's a deliberate effort at addressing an issue, and then it comes into law. And that's, I think, what was expected with the TJRC.
Yeah.
The TJRC Act establishes the commission and gives commission mandate to go ahead and investigate all forms of injustices since independence in this country, prepare a report. They prepared voluminous report, hand it over to the president takes it to parliament, and then it was expected that the parliament would look at the report, adopt the report, and thereafter start implementing the report by saying this is how then we shall address these issues. These kind of injustices, there shall be reparations, there shall be compensation according to the recommendations of the. So they'd have put in the legal mechanisms for ensuring that these things happen. If the president just went ahead and just dusted up the report, TJRC, and told Parliament, Kimani Shongo, come, take this to Parliament and ask the members of Parliament to at least reflect and adopt this report. They'd have started somewhere. And then also say that there's this issue that has happened since the TJRC report was handed over to the president so many years ago. Since then, we don't have any other thing. So can we come up with a framework that looks at since TJRC going forward and what happens? Then we'd be saying we are addressing something. But maybe we'd have come again and started arguing. You see, now this thing is so many years. We are dealing with so many years. This thing will never move.
So this is the beginning of moving the needle, in a sense.
So with things that are fresh, they're fresh, they're here. I mean, 2017 is just the other day. So they are all really, really fresh. And the victims are all, here, their families are here. They can all be called and write a statement. The records are still there. So we can deal with these ones. I just don't know why we agreed, at what point we agreed that 2017 is the point of start.
Is the point of start?
That's the question. And maybe to your point, it's fresh. We can trace, we can track, but we'll also need to backdate. That one will be difficult to avoid, but let's see.
This is the only time where I think time is not on our side as far as compensation and reparations is concerned. But I think that's where the conversation should actually start from.
Should Makau Mutua gazette some hearing dates and invite members of the public to come and give their opinions? Would you go?
But why would Makau Mutua does not have the mandate to gazette anything?
He has, well, if he uses this framework compensation, using the office of the president, because it's anchored in the office of the president, says that these are the dates when Makau Mutua and the team shall be listening to people.
I think from the onset, if indeed any form of gazettement that is going to be done, I hope it will come out from the OG's office. But I think one way or another, it should rightly happen. I think it's a good cause. It's just that let it just happen within the constitutional framework.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think...
So if there was an invitation, an official government invitation, for you to go and present, for members of the public to present their views to this particular framework being coordinated by Professor Makau Mutua, will you attend?
I don't think I will attend if it comes from Makau Mutua.
What if it comes from the president, but it's Makau who will be sitting and listening?
I think, considering my opinion set aside, and considering that I'm representing a few families, I know where that pain is coming from. And if there is something that I can do from my part to help them give some form of solution or rather moving something, I'm willing to set aside my feelings for that. But I do hope that one way or another, I will have senior members who are not only will-minded and they're very concerned of how the implementation is going to be done. Because from the moment I see something wrong, I'm literally not going to be there.
Speaking truth to power. Thank you.
Asante sana. Wakili and Mutiso has been our guest this morning. We've been talking about, this framework that's been established by the president. In the next hour, we'll have a mini baraza in the studio, where we shall be celebrating top 40 under 40 women. If you pick up your copy of the Business Daily today, you will see the list of all 40 of them. And even Wakili is smiling.
I do have a friend who is on that list, and I'm very, very proud of her.
Nice.
Fantastic. Fantastic. We'll be talking to them shortly. Keep it here for that. It's coming up to 8 a.m.